In many human systems, survival is not determined only by effort or ability. It is determined by access. Who is allowed inside? Who is trusted? Who is considered appropriate for opportunity? These decisions are rarely neutral. They are shaped by appearance, reputation, and perceived status. When access is controlled this way, people learn something early. Being capable is not enough. Being honest is not enough. What matters most is whether you fit the image that the system already recognizes as acceptable. This creates pressure long before any moral choice appears. People begin to notice that doors do not open evenly. Some identities move freely, others are stopped, questioned, or ignored. Over time, this teaches a lesson that is rarely spoken aloud: adapt or remain invisible. In such environments, identity becomes strategic. Not because people enjoy deception, but because remaining unchanged carries cost. Hunger, exclusion, risk, and stagnation accumulate quietly. The system does not punish directly, it simply withholds. Under these conditions, lying changes meaning. It stops being an ethical problem and becomes a tool, a way to pass through barriers that do not respond to truth, a way to be seen in a language power understands. This is not a story about villains pretending to be heroes. It is a pattern about ordinary people adjusting themselves to structures that reward performance over reality. When recognition determines survival, authenticity becomes a luxury. The longer this persists, the more normalized it becomes. People stop asking whether an identity is true, they ask whether it works. The system does not correct this behavior, it reinforces it. Those who adapt move forward. Those who do not remain trapped. This is how moral confusion forms, not through malice, but through repetition. Pretending feels justified when it reduces suffering. Deception feels harmless when the alternative is exclusion. Over time, the line between survival and manipulation becomes difficult to locate. This is the environment where certain figures emerge. Figures who do not challenge the system directly, but learn to move inside it by reshaping themselves. They do not attack power, they mirror it. This is not rebellion, it is navigation. This is where the pattern begins. Aladdin appears in a world where position is inherited long before it is earned. Wealth, safety, and attention flow through narrow channels. Those born outside them are not punished openly, they are simply overlooked. Opportunity exists, but it is guarded by appearances. Within this environment, Aladdin's behavior makes sense. He does not confront the hierarchy directly, he moves around it. He learns quickly that effort alone does not change how he is treated. When he is seen as poor, he is ignored. When he is seen as insignificant, his intentions do not matter. So he adapts. Aladdin survives by reading situations accurately. He notices how people respond to clothing, confidence, and presentation. He learns which signals open doors and which close them. This is not framed as strategy at first, it is framed as instinct, a way to avoid hunger, a way to avoid danger, a way to stay visible. His small deceptions are practical. They are not designed to harm, they are designed to pass, to avoid being stopped, dismissed, or controlled. When he exaggerates or conceals parts of himself, the immediate outcome improves. He eats, he moves freely, he is not questioned as closely. The pattern reinforces itself. When Aladdin presents himself as more than he is, people respond differently. They listen, they trust, they assume competence. Nothing about his inner character has changed, but his access has. This teaches a clear lesson. The system is less interested in truth than in performance. Over time, Aladdin's identity becomes flexible. He is not anchored to a single role because no single role grants him stability. He shifts based on context. Street survivor in one moment, confident suitor in another. Each version works where the other would fail. This is important. Aladdin is not lying randomly. He is matching himself to expectations that already exist. He is speaking the language power recognizes. Within this familiar pattern, his actions feel justified. He does not take from others, he does not impose control. He borrows appearances. He passes through spaces that would otherwise reject him. From the inside, this feels less like deception and more like translation. The people around him confirm this logic. They reward the performance. They offer protection, admiration, and opportunity once he appears acceptable. The system does not question the mismatch between appearance and reality. It relies on it. Nothing in this pattern feels unstable yet. Aladdin's flexibility produces results. His charm smooths interactions. His improvisation keeps him alive. Each successful performance reduces the perceived cost of pretending. At this stage, the system appears navigable. Identity feels adjustable. Truth feels optional. Survival feels possible without confrontation. The pattern holds. The behavior works. No pressure has arrived yet. Structural tension appears when adaptation stops being occasional and becomes necessary. At first, Aladdin's flexibility feels like advantage. He can shift roles, adjust tone, and read situations faster than others. But as the environment tightens, these adjustments are no longer optional. They become requirements. The system around him begins to demand consistency. Access is no longer granted for brief moments. It requires sustained performance. The more Aladdin benefits from appearing acceptable, the more the system expects him to remain that way. This is where tension enters. Aladdin's earlier deceptions worked because they were temporary. He could pass through a situation and return to himself afterward. But once opportunity depends on maintaining an image over time, the cost of slipping increases. Mistakes carry consequences. Inconsistencies are noticed. Attention sharpens. The environment does not accuse him directly. It does something quieter. It watches. As Aladdin moves into spaces that were previously closed to him, he becomes more visible. Visibility brings access, but it also brings scrutiny. Questions become more detailed. Expectations become clearer. The system that once ignored him now tracks him. This creates a shift in risk. Before, pretending helped him avoid harm. Now, pretending creates exposure. The more he succeeds, the more there is to lose. Hunger is replaced by fear of discovery. Exclusion is replaced by the threat of removal. Importantly, Aladdin does not change his goals. He still wants security, connection, and dignity. What changes is the cost of achieving them. The system no longer allows partial truth. It rewards coherence, a single identity, a stable story. This is difficult because Aladdin's strength was never stability, it was responsiveness. As pressure builds, his performances must become more elaborate. Details must align. Background must match presentation. Confidence must remain consistent even when circumstances shift. The role begins to shape his behavior rather than the other way around. At the same time, relationships deepen. People begin to rely on the version of Aladdin they believe they know. Expectations form around that version, promises are implied, future plans assume continuity. This creates a structural trap. Aladdin cannot easily step out of the role without losing everything the role has provided. But remaining inside it requires constant maintenance. He must remember what he has said, who he has been to whom, which version of himself is currently in use. The tension is not moral yet, it is logistical. The system demands identity as a condition for trust. Aladdin's survival strategy was never designed for that. His flexibility now works against him. Adaptation becomes instability. Improvisation becomes risk. The environment has not become crueler, it has become more ordered, and order exposes inconsistency more than chaos ever did. Aladdin feels this as pressure without clear origin. Nothing specific has gone wrong, but everything feels tighter, less forgiving, less open to correction. His movements are freer than before, but his margins are narrower. This is the moment before power dynamics become explicit, before psychological cost becomes visible, before values are tested by strain rather than intention. Aladdin has not lied more than before. The system has simply stopped tolerating fluidity. And fluidity was the only protection he had. Machiavelli is concerned with how power actually moves, not how it claims to move. He pays attention to access, reputation, visibility, and control of perception. From this lens, Aladdin's situation becomes less about lying and more about positioning. Aladdin does not possess power of his own. He does not control resources, armies, or law. What he controls is appearance. He learns very early that appearance is often enough. When power holders decide who is worthy of attention, they do not verify deeply. They respond to signals. Clothing, confidence, language, and proximity do most of the work. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. Power is rarely distributed after careful inspection. It is distributed based on plausibility. Those who look as if they belong are treated as if they do. Aladdin's adaptation exploits this weakness in the system. He does not force entry, he aligns himself with existing expectations. He mirrors the image of legitimacy that power already trusts. This makes his movement efficient and hard to challenge. No rule is broken openly, no authority is directly confronted. But Machiavelli would also see the danger. Borrowed power is fragile. Aladdin's access depends entirely on continued performance. He does not command loyalty, he benefits from assumption. The moment doubt enters, the entire structure collapses. There is no buffer. Visibility becomes the central risk. Aladdin must be seen to gain opportunity, but being seen means being observed. Each interaction adds information. Each conversation tightens the net. The same visibility that elevates him also exposes him. Machiavelli would note that Aladdin lacks control over narrative. He does not shape how others speak about him independently. His reputation is not managed by institutions or allies. It exists only as long as each encounter reinforces the same image. One inconsistency is enough to destabilize everything. This creates asymmetry. Those with real power can survive contradiction. They can explain, reframe, or ignore it. Aladdin cannot. He must be coherent at all times. The system demands perfection from those without protection. From a Machiavellian view, this is not moral failure, it is structural vulnerability. As Aladdin's position improves, his margin for error shrinks. He gains access but loses flexibility. He cannot withdraw without consequence. He cannot correct impressions easily. Retreat would look suspicious. Silence would look like guilt. Machiavelli would also observe that Aladdin's deception does not threaten power directly. In fact, it reinforces it. By aspiring to fit the image valued by authority, Aladdin confirms that the image itself is legitimate. He does not challenge the hierarchy, he validates it by striving to enter. This is crucial. His success does not destabilize the system. It demonstrates how the system can be navigated by those who learn to perform correctly. Power remains untouched. From this lens, Aladdin is not a rebel. He is an adapter. He reveals that access is less about justice and more about presentation. Machiavelli would see this as a lesson in how easily power can be deceived and how little it cares as long as appearances hold. But Machiavelli would also predict the outcome. Power tolerates deception only when it remains invisible. Once discovered, it punishes sharply, not out of moral outrage, but to restore deterrence. Aladdin's position is therefore unstable by design. He survives inside power's blind spots. The moment those blind spots close, his protection disappears. Machiavelli would not ask whether Aladdin deserves punishment or reward. He would simply observe that power does not forgive those who expose its dependence on appearances. Aladdin does not control the game. He plays it well, and in Machiavellian systems, that is never enough to guarantee safety. Jung becomes relevant when a role must be maintained long enough that it starts to reshape the person carrying it. His concern is not deception itself, but what happens inside a psyche that is forced to split in order to function. In Aladdin's case, this split is gradual and easy to miss. At first, Aladdin's performances feel external. He presents a version of himself to gain access, then returns inwardly to who he believes he is. The role is something he puts on and takes off, This separation protects him. It allows him to adapt without feeling false. But as the environment demands consistency, that separation weakens. The persona Aladdin presents begins to harden. It acquires expectations, history, and emotional weight. Others respond to this persona as if it is real, because for them, it is. Over time, Aladdin must respond back to them as that persona, not as himself. Jung would describe this as over-identification with the persona. The social mask stops being a tool and starts becoming the structure through which the world relates to him. This is where psychological cost appears. Aladdin cannot express uncertainty without risking exposure. He cannot admit ignorance without breaking character. He cannot contradict the image others hold of him without destabilizing trust. So these impulses are suppressed, not eliminated, but pushed inward. They become part of the shadow. The shadow here is not cruelty or malice. It is fear, exhaustion, resentment, and doubt. Aladdin must constantly regulate himself. He must remember what he has claimed, how he has acted, and who he is supposed to be in each context. This sustained self-monitoring creates internal tension. Jung would note that the psyche is not designed for permanent performance. When a person cannot rest in authenticity, energy is diverted from integration into maintenance. Over time, this produces strain. Aladdin may begin to feel detached from his own experiences. Success does not feel grounding. Praise does not feel secure. Connection feels conditional. Everything depends on continuity of the role. This makes intimacy dangerous. Being truly known risks collapse, so distance increases. Internally, Aladdin may still see himself as adaptable and clever, but the world increasingly treats him as fixed. This mismatch creates confusion. He is praised for traits he feels he is borrowing. He is trusted for qualities he does not fully recognize as his own. Jung would see this as identity diffusion. The boundary between self and persona blurs. Aladdin begins to ask, quietly and without language, which version of himself is real? At the same time, the shadow grows heavier. Every moment of dishonesty, every deflection, every avoided truth adds weight. Not because Aladdin believes he is immoral, but because unresolved tension accumulates. What is not integrated seeks expression. This can appear as irritability, restlessness, or sudden withdrawal, or as overcompensation. Aladdin may double down on charm, generosity, or bravado to reinforce the persona when it feels threatened. These behaviors are not calculated, they are defensive. Jung would emphasize that this is not a flaw in character, it is the cost of survival through performance. The longer Aladdin remains inside the persona, the more difficult integration becomes. To integrate would require acknowledging the full scope of the deception, not to others, but to himself. That acknowledgement threatens collapse. It risks loss of access, safety, and belonging. So the psyche resists. Aladdin continues forward without resolving the split. The persona remains dominant. The shadow remains unintegrated. The self becomes narrower, defined by what can be safely shown. Jung would say that this kind of narrowing does not destroy a person immediately. It stabilizes them for a time, but it reduces flexibility. When pressure increases further, there is less internal space to adapt. Aladdin is not psychologically broken. He is psychologically divided. And divided systems endure only as long as external conditions remain favorable. Nietzsche enters when values stop functioning smoothly and begin to reveal their limits. He is less interested in whether values sound noble than in whether they can survive pressure. He asks where values come from, what conditions support them, and what happens when those conditions change. Applied to Aladdin, this lens exposes a quiet instability. Aladdin's values are easy to name: survival without cruelty, advancement without open violence, belonging without submission. These values emerge naturally in a world where exclusion is constant and force is unevenly distributed. They are adaptive values. They help him move through a hostile environment without becoming openly destructive. For a time, these values work. Nietzsche would note that this is because the environment shelters them. Aladdin's deception is tolerated because it produces desirable outcomes. No one is harmed directly, order is not disrupted, the system benefits from his performance as much as he does. Under these conditions, values are not tested, they are rewarded. But Nietzsche is interested in what happens when reward turns into dependency. As Aladdin's position improves, the cost of his values rises. Pretending was once a way to survive exclusion. Now it is a way to maintain status. The same behavior that once reduced harm now sustains inequality by reinforcing appearances. His values begin to serve the system he once navigated defensively. This creates strain. Nietzsche would describe this as a shift from active values to reactive ones. Aladdin's values were formed in response to pressure. They were shaped by what the environment denied him. As pressure changes, those values lose clarity. They no longer point toward growth, they point toward preservation. Preservation demands caution. Aladdin's value of flexibility becomes reluctance to risk truth. His value of charm becomes dependence on approval. His value of adaptation becomes fear of exposure. These are not moral failures. They are signs that values built for scarcity struggle under visibility. Nietzsche would also question the moral language surrounding Aladdin's actions. We tend to describe his behavior as clever, resourceful, or harmless. But Nietzsche would ask whether these descriptions mask a deeper dependency. Are these values chosen freely, or are they enforced by the environment? If Aladdin could succeed without pretending, would he still choose these values? Or are they virtues only because alternatives are punished? This matters because Nietzsche is skeptical of virtues that cannot survive freedom. As Aladdin gains access, he does not gain authorship of his values. He does not redefine what matters. He protects what already works. His values harden instead of transforming. They become rules for survival rather than expressions of strength. At the same time, new values emerge around him. Stability, transparency, consistency. These values are not more moral, they are more functional for those who already belong. They clash with Aladdin's values not because one side is right, but because they serve different conditions. Nietzsche would see this as inevitable conflict. Values born from exclusion rarely dominate systems built on continuity. They can disrupt, they can adapt, but once the environment demands coherence, those values lose leverage. They either evolve or retreat into defensiveness. Aladdin's values resist evolution. To evolve would require risking exposure and accepting loss. That risk threatens everything he has gained, so the values remain fixed. They continue to justify performance rather than growth. Nietzsche would say that this is where values lose vitality. They remain present, but they no longer shape the future. They become tools for maintaining position rather than creating direction. Aladdin does not become immoral, his values become insufficient. They helped him enter the system. They cannot tell him what to do once he is inside. This is not a judgment, it is a pressure test. And pressure has begun to show where his values were conditional all along. After the shift, the story changes its internal logic. It no longer revolves around opportunity appearing and being seized, it revolves around continuity being preserved. Aladdin is still moving forward, but the movement is quieter and more constrained. Earlier, adaptation created momentum. Each improvisation opened space, each performance created access. Now, adaptation serves a different function. It prevents collapse. The goal is no longer to enter new spaces, but to remain inside the ones already reached. This alters the rhythm of the narrative. Moments that once felt spontaneous now feel calculated. Choices are made with future consequences in mind. Aladdin becomes careful not because he is afraid, but because inconsistency now carries cost. Trust depends on predictability. Predictability depends on repetition. The environment reinforces this shift subtly. Fewer chances for reinvention appear, fewer gaps remain unguarded. The system does not need to exclude him anymore. It needs him to conform. Aladdin notices that success now depends less on cleverness and more on restraint. Saying less becomes safer than saying more. Revealing less becomes more efficient than explaining. Silence replaces improvisation. Narratively, this produces ambiguity rather than conflict. There is no dramatic exposure, no public collapse, no clear betrayal. Instead, there is gradual narrowing. The space to maneuver shrinks without announcing itself. Relationships change as well. People interact with the version of Aladdin they recognize, not the person behind it. Expectations solidify, roles become fixed. Flexibility, once his strength, becomes a liability. The story becomes procedural. Actions are taken to maintain balance, not to transform conditions. Progress slows, stability becomes the unspoken priority. Aladdin is not punished for pretending, he is rewarded for sustaining the pretense. And in that reward, the story loses its earlier openness. What remains is continuation without direction. The system functions, the role holds, the future becomes harder to imagine clearly. The narrative does not end, it simply stops moving forward in the way it once did. Figures like Aladdin remain compelling because they reveal something uncomfortable about how human systems actually function. Not because they break rules, but because they follow them more accurately than others. They learn early that access is not distributed by truth, but by recognition. When environments reward appearance over substance, adaptation becomes moralized. Lying feels less like betrayal and more like fluency. The question is no longer whether an identity is honest, but whether it is legible to power. This does not make the system evil, it makes it selective, and selectivity quietly reshapes behavior long before anyone names it as pressure. What begins as survival becomes maintenance. What begins as flexibility becomes obligation. The system does not demand deception, it simply rewards those who perform consistently enough to remain inside. In such conditions, identity stops being something one is, it becomes something one sustains. Nothing resolves this tension cleanly. Exposure is costly, continuation is costly. The system does not offer a neutral exit, it only offers paths that favor stability over truth. And so the figure persists, not as a liar in the moral sense, but as a mirror of what the environment makes possible. Until the next observation.